Hi, I'm Dan Toomey, guest curator at the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum, and this is the War Came by Train exhibit. This exhibit is the largest Civil War railroad exhibit ever presented. It coincides with the American Civil War sesquicentennial. It runs for 5 years and changes each year to address that year of the war. The interesting aspect of our exhibit is the fact that we are on location, that many of the events that took place with the B&O Railroad were in this exact area. We have the very equipment that was used by the B&O Railroad during the Civil War, and we present a bottom-up history of the B&O Railroad during the Civil War by presenting the technologies and the people that were involved with riding, guarding, destroying, building, and operating the railroad during the Civil War years. This would be an entire area of activity. There were paint shops, there were carpentry shops, car shops. They were casting of rail, there were machine shops, they were building bridge parts, rails, continuously loading these things on trains. And as the Confederates would damage a section of track or blow up a bridge, the repair crews would go out, they would pull out the damage, they'd load it on the cars, bring it back here, and recycle it. I firmly believe that at the outbreak of the war, and I'm talking about the first 90 days, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was the first military and political objective of the war. Both the Confederate States and the United States were playing good cop, bad cop to woo the state of Maryland into the Union or into the Confederacy. And Robert E. Lee gave specific instructions to his field commanders from Harper's Ferry all the way up to Wheeling. Do not attack, do not harm the B&O Railroad. We want it for ourselves. Once it became apparent that Maryland would not leave the Union, then things turned around and the B&O Railroad became a continuous target for the Confederate operations throughout the war. But with no railroad, because of its geographic position, the only railroad that serves the nation's capital till well after the Civil War, no railroad was more important to the Union war effort than the Baltimore and Ohio. One of the aspects that made the Civil War the first modern war, without question, was the railroad and its application to moving of supplies and troops. The United States Army did not have a component until the Civil War when it created the United States Military Railroad. Part of that United States Military Railroad was the Construction Corps commanded by General Herman Haupt. As the war progressed, Haupt was given regiments of white troops to work as construction crew. These troops were basically whatever was handy. They weren't interested in doing the work, and they were short-term anyway, so they never learned the job very well, and they weren't very interested. At this same time, the ex-slaves began to pass through the Union lines as the Union Army went deeper into the Confederacy. Known as contraband, they were allowed to go to work for the Union Army. Haupt seized on this ability of men used to hard labor, willing to work, thrilled to be away from the slave owner's lash, and readily adapted themselves to railroad construction. By the end of the war, Haupt had employed approximately 10,000 ex-slaves as part of his railroad construction corps. This exhibit portrays John Boston, one of those men who had escaped slavery and went to work on the construction corps of the United States Military Railroad. This is the last section of our Roundhouse exhibit. As we've passed through, you have seen different topics presented by the travelers, the workers, the soldiers guarding or attacking the railroad. Lastly, we look at the train crew. The train crew had a very special task, a very exciting job, a very dangerous job. Trains were derailed, locomotive boilers blew up, Confederates attacked them and derailed them and fired cannons at them, so it was quite a dangerous profession, but it was also a very exciting profession. What you have to appreciate about Civil War railroading, and this is only under ideal conditions, a Civil War locomotive could go 60 miles an hour. That was the fastest thing on earth. No ship, no person, no animal could travel nearly half the speed, half the distance, or half the strength of a locomotive. So if you were the crew of a locomotive, the conductor, the fireman, the engineer, you were the same as a shuttle crew. You were the same as an astronaut. You were looked up to. This was the highest skilled position on any railroad. We met a Union soldier over there just recently. That Union soldier made $13 a month. This locomotive engineer made $4 a day. It was a skill position, it was a highly respected position, and it kind of summarizes the whole workforce of the B&O Railroad and Civil War railroading in general.